egg whites and sugar, and sometimes we put a little cream of tartar in there as well. So these are the three kinds of meringues and how they're used. So French meringue is the most basic, and that's the one that Myra and I probably learned to do. It is something that beats to a soft peak, although mine is a stiffer peak this morning. I actually, have quite a peak on here. It's actually maybe overbeaten. I had a little incident this morning, so it wasn't going as smoothly as I liked it to go. But it beats to a soft peak. When you beat it to a soft peak is when you add the sugar. And usually this kind of meringue is spooned or piped into different forms. So you can make things like these meringue cookies out of French meringue. Now mine are not, I did them kind of in a hurry with a cookie, with a piping bag and a tip. And you can make beautiful, artistic, colorful meringues. Loretta, I need to ask you, in school, did you make meringue cookies?
Yes, we had to make meringue cookies.
So tell us a little bit about that, will you?
Oh, it's been a while. I know the whole thing about putting it in the oven at 200 for like 2 hours or something like that.
Okay.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, and so that they are typically, the meringue is spooned into a bag like this. And then there you have tips. Mine is a KitchenAid, and it comes with very many different size tips and shapes of tips. And I can put that tip on and then hang this out over a mason jar, perhaps, something to hold it upright, and then put my meringue in there. I just recently, I was a little challenged with this bag. I was trying to fill it when it was up like this, like its usual way. This is how it comes, flattened out. So I was trying to fill it like that, and everything was still, they're very hard to fill that way. So rolling it down is important, because if everything stays up here, when you go to squeeze, all your meringue comes out the top instead of out the bottom. So maybe that's a trick you've learned long ago, but I was learning this as I was learning how to use a pastry bag. So this is used to make those cookies. It's sometimes folded into batters like soufflés. Do you recall, Loretta, moving that moving or folding that?
Yes, into soufflés, chocolate mousse. That's probably where I use the meringue mostly, when I make my chocolate mousse. And then one of the steps is folding in the meringue into the chocolate mousse.
Okay, and what does that do then for a mousse?
Just kind of gives it that fluffy, airy texture.
Yeah, it's all about the air, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also it can be used as a topping for desserts. I actually added that on because I use it and can use it successfully. So that is the most basic. It is the least stable of the meringues. The second type of meringue that Loretta was talking about was the Swiss meringue. And that is where you beat egg whites and sugar together in a pan above some boiling water. And you then take it off the heat and beat it very vigorously. And after the temperature reaches 120 to 130. So you're beating it on the stove over a water bath. It's not on direct heat. It's on a kettle that has water underneath it and a bowl on top with your meringue. Beating it, keeping the temperature until it gets to 120 to 130 degrees, then take it off and beat it very vigorously, and it gets smoother and more silky. And it is often used as a base for buttercream frosting. Loretta, what would you add to that? Anything?
Just maybe flavoring.
Okay.
An extract. I've never used it for buttercream frosting, though. Never thought about that.
How have you used it?
Just for topping of pie.
Okay, so you have made it that way. And how do you see that it's different than the other kind of meringue that you make when you visually work with it?
Well, it holds the peaks. It holds the peaks. It's a lot stiffer, and I
Okay.
think the heat also kills anything if there's any bacteria in the eggs. That's what I learned. Many years ago.
Wow.
That with that heat, because people are afraid of like raw eggs.
Yeah.
So that heat would kill anything that the raw eggs may have.
Yes. And I looked into that a little bit myself because I was a little concerned about talking about French meringue today because of that very reason. And what I learned is that while it's not like completely without risk, um, mostly bacteria is harbored in the yolk of an egg as opposed to the white of an egg. So it really lessens that concern a little bit for me. And I hadn't known that. So something I learned there. And then lastly, I think the most stable of all the meringues is the Italian meringue. And that is where you drizzle the syrup. And that's the one, Loretta, that you enjoy using. And does my description look like what you know? Drizzle 240-degree sugar syrup. Use a candy thermometer or a thermometer until it gets to that syrup stage. And then you're just drizzling it in while the beaters are moving. One thing I learned is I think I need a KitchenAid standing mixer. I've gone all these years with just using a hand mixer. And I guess I might need one. Can you imagine? Well, I'm not a huge baker because I don't like the temptations too much in my house. But so I've been able to get away with it. But now I'm intrigued, and now I might have to get myself a mixer for these classes.
You need to get one. It'll change your world.
Yes, it will.
It will. I can imagine this morning how much better things would have gone if I would have had my two hands free instead of using a hand mixer. So anyway, this one is most stable. You can use it to frost cakes by itself if you flavor it. And Loretta was talking about flavoring, which I believe gets folded in at the end after you're done beating. Is that what you do? You can put.
Correct. Yeah, that's the last step when I make chocolate mousse.
Okay. And if you're wanting a pure white meringue, then you want to make sure that you're using a vanilla that is clear or an extract that is clear so that you don't get a tint. You'll get a slightly golden color if you use a vanilla that is the traditional brown. So as Loretta was saying, you can use it to lighten your mousses. You can put it in ice cream. Now, I've never seen it. I've never heard of that. I don't know about that. Anybody know about that? So something for us to explore, ice creams and sorbets. All right. So a little bit about the science of meringue, and I won't overwhelm you with this, but there are words in here that are real sciencey, hydrophilic and hydrophobic. And just want to go into this little article. I'm going to send this along so you can understand a little bit more about the science of meringue. And I think you can watch this little video on your own, but I'm going to just explain it in very, very easy terms. Eggs are made up of protein, and when we start beating them, those proteins start to separate, and there are amino acids in there that like water, and amino acids in there that don't like water. And so the ones that like water, because an egg white is made of water and protein, those stay in the liquid part of the egg white. And the ones that don't like water hop up into those bubbles that form. So they start to form a chain and a structure. And then what we have to do is provide some scaffolding for that structure because it's very weak on its own. If you didn't add anything else, it would go back to its state at some point. You just left the foamy egg whites, it would go back to liquid. So when you add cream of tartar and you add sugar, you're adding more structure and stability to that meringue. Anything that you would add from I know that it was a long time ago, Loretta, so I'm not, but I wanted to ask you if you knew something different or additional that you would add to that. Did I get it right?
Yeah, but what I remember is that just make sure there's no yolk in the egg whites because you won't get the volume.
That is extremely important. When we talk about making meringue, there cannot be one little hint of grease. I used to think it was water. Well, it is that too, but you have got to have either a glass or a metal bowl to make your meringue in. And why don't you want to use a plastic bowl? Well, plastic bowl, as much as we are, and this is not to cast aspersion on anybody's, including mine, dishwashing abilities, but plastic seems to hold oil. And so if there's even the tiniest bit of residual oil in your plastic bowl, then that can really defeat your meringue making efforts. So yolk has fat in it, and that's why we can't have even a little bit of yolk in the bowl. And so to avoid contaminating a lot of whites, so if you're making 3 or 4 whites, a meringue with 3 or 4 whites, what we don't want to do is crack all of our egg whites into one bowl at one time. We need to crack each egg separately, and that way, if one yolk breaks, we're not contaminating 4 egg whites. So one at a time, and then add it to your big bowl. So this is some of the science additionally that we've already spoken about. Let me see if I've covered most everything. So the sugar provides stability, but it also provides crispness. So sugar, there's a lot of sugar in these, and when you bite into them, well, these not, because I made them a while ago. When you bite into them, they should be crunchy, not chewy, crunchy. And that's because of the sugar. Now, the one thing that's important in keeping meringue cookies is that you store them in an airtight container, always, because as soon as they are exposed to the air with moisture in it, they get sticky. And you could probably see some of the brown there, the sugar down at the bottom. The sugar it just starts to degrade, and this starts to get gummy. So I wouldn't eat these now, but they hold their shape and they look fine for demonstration. Cream of tartar is an acid. If you can't use cream of tartar, lemon juice can be used in its place, and it can be used as ½ teaspoon to 1/4 cream of tartar. So you're only using a little bit of cream of tartar here, but it does aid in creating peaks for our meringue. Now, not sure if you can see this. Can you see this fairly well? Okay. So we talked about some of these things. We're going to separate 1 egg at a time. Room temperature egg whites seem to be the way to go. So set your eggs out ahead of time. Anybody have any different experiences than that? Anybody, Loretta, in your class, were you taught to use room temperature or refrigerating?
Room temperature.
Room temperature.
And then if you don't have room temperature, a bowl of warm water, put the eggs in a bowl of warm water for like 5 minutes, and that will bring it to room temperature.
Okay, there we go. So if you're in a hurry and you forgot to take your egg whites out of the refrigerator, we talked about using a spotless metal or glass bowl. And we talked about beating this until we get peaks that are stiff and glossy. That's the end result that we want. And when we're adding sugar, we add it by the tablespoon so that we can beat that in. Now, I'm sorry, I keep picking on Loretta, but if anybody else has meringue experience, please chime in. I want to know what kind of sugar you prefer when making a meringue. So just pop in and tell me what you use.
Dixie Crystal.
Dixie Crystal. And what is that? Is that what type of sugar is that? Is that a granulated sugar or a superfine?
It's a granulated sugar.
Granulated sugar. Okay. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
At the grocery store, you can get cartons of egg whites. Can you use those instead of separating the eggs?
Well, I have seen some mixed reviews on that. Anybody else have experience with that? Some people say
You have to take it and taken and labeled, because quite taken it often the egg whites you find in the quart container contains preservatives, and I don't know, how that would take an effect whipping or anything else like that.
an excellent point. It's the same kind of question about whether you can use a sugar substitute, because you can't. Sugar substitutes do not have the same chemical makeup as sugar. So they do not produce that same result with an egg, with a meringue. So what I'm looking at here about egg whites in a carton, they're usually pasteurized. So it says with a lot of whipping and more cream of tartar or more stabilizer, pasteurized egg whites or eggs from cartons can make a meringue, though it most likely won't be as stiff as those from non-pasteurized eggs. So there's an answer for you.
Thanks.
So you can experiment with those and see what you think. And when you're, so sugar, I want to go back to the sugar question. Loretta, what kind of sugar were you using in school?
The superfine sugar. We've used superfine sugar, but I have used regular granulated sugar. Superfine sugar, if I'm not mistaken, they'll whip faster. The superfine sugar.
Yeah, you can use superfine sugar, the real small granules. You can even use confectioner sugar, which is what I use today. And the reason why you might use a powdered sugar or a very fine sugar is that the sugar has to dissolve in your meringue. If it doesn't dissolve, two things happen. It can get watery, it can break the egg whites down, and it can also be grainy. So you can test your meringue. If I take a bit of this meringue and put it between my fingers like this, I don't feel anything. But if you do use granulated sugar and you're testing along your meringue, you're going to feel that, and you're going to have to keep beating it until you don't feel that any longer, for obvious reasons, not only for the structure of the meringue, but also the texture when you're eating it. So that's why the finer the sugar, the better. Okay. And then when we do beat it, we're beating it a tablespoon at a time. So we don't dump the whole amount in at one time. We give it a chance to blend in and get incorporated and melted before we overwhelm the egg white. And when we're making a meringue cookie, for instance, we bake those at a very low temperature. So meringue cookies, as Loretta was saying, a couple of hours in the oven at 200 degrees, 225, some recipes call for. But then the secret to really having those crisp up so that all the moisture is out of them is to leave your oven closed and leave them in there for several hours. So my best time to make meringue cookies is at night. Put them in the oven, turn them on at 200 degrees, and the next morning the oven's cool. I wasn't tempted to open it. They're finished and they're dry and they're crisp, and they go immediately into a container that's airtight. And a typical batch makes a lot of cookies. Myra, did you have a question? I didn't know if you were talking. You have your microphone muted. You might be talking to somebody else. I don't know. Okay. So thoughts or additions or questions about any of this so far?
Sometimes I freeze my egg whites. Oh.
That's okay.
I remember as a child, my mother would make coconut cake, and she would use the same method with beating the eggs and the sugar, cooking it on top of the stove for the coconut cake. I remember that.
Okay, so she for the cake, did she blend that in with the frosting then?
Right. Mm-hmm. Blend it in with the frosting.
Yeah, it makes it really light and creamy. Nice. Yeah. And Loretta, you were going to say something too?
Oh, well, sometimes I freeze egg whites because if I'm making lemon curd, I need more yolks than whites. So then I'll freeze the whites. But I've never made a meringue from frozen whites. Have you experienced that? And do they work just as good as if they were fresh?
I have not.
In other words, obviously, after they're defrosted, of course.
Yeah, right, right. I have not done that, but I think I'll try that. I'll put them in, or you try it and let me know, but I'll do that. I think I'd like to know that as well. But you know what? I'm going to look it up. Can I use,
I'm sorry, did you say something to me?
no, I was just
Okay.
look that up. I'm sorry. I was just glancing around here on lost my search bar. Let me use, I'm typing in, can I use frozen egg whites for meringue? And let's just see what they say, Not that we can trust Google for everything, but freeze the egg whites individually for ease. You can freeze them in ice cube trays and then resealable. They whisk particularly well for meringues and pavlovas. So yeah, and pavlova is an Australian dessert named after Anna Pavlova, the ballerina. And I think we might have a class on that where we all get to make our own. Why don't we all try making pavlovas? And what a photo op that would be. So it looks like we can do that. Use those frozen egg whites. Where'd you go? I lost Loretta. Okay, so I'm going to do this very simple dessert for you now. In fact, I did more than these are lemon meringue, essentially lemon meringue pies in a cup. I'm just turning on my broiler right now because we're going to use that. What I did was make a lemon curd, and I'm sending you this recipe. This is a lemon curd that's made out of the yolks of the eggs that I used for the whites. So Loretta was talking about having a recipe where she had more whites than yolks, or she needed more yolks. And my recipe is a little bit different. It does allow me to use both the whites and the yolks to make this dessert and have equal quantities of each. So I'm going to bring up the recipe so I can talk to you about it. Okay, I'm going to stop my share here for a second. This is what the end result is before we do the meringue. So let me talk you through this recipe a little bit. I made a crust, and the crust had graham cracker crumbs, a half cup of graham cracker crumbs, a teaspoon of sugar, and 2 tablespoons of melted butter. You're going to get this recipe so you don't have to write anything down. So all I did was layer those into the bottom of this glass cup. Now this is a six ounce cup. If you have something a little smaller, it'll make a good full 6 of these. I have 6 made here, but they're not all the way full. If you wanted to, you'd be fine if you wanted to fill this with whipped cream. So you'd have plenty, but you can also use smaller cups. You can use votive candle cups, which was a neat thing that somebody in a previous class talked about. She went to the Target or one of the stores where she could inexpensively buy a box of votive candle holders, and she uses those for little dessert glasses, which I thought was a very neat idea, good size serving. And you might have seen the picture that I flashed up there on the slide. They put the crumbs on top. Don't do that. I tried that. What happens is when you put your spoon in your dessert and you pull it out to take the first bite, the crumbs go everywhere. So It looked great, but so this was a recipe that called for 3 eggs. And what I did was I separated the egg whites from the yolk, and I beat these egg whites here with a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar and 6 tablespoons of confectioner's sugar. That's what I used. And then for the lemon curd, what I did was use the egg yolks, but I started with heating up, well, putting together a 1.5 cups of sugar and 1/3 cup of cornstarch. So I blended that together in my saucepan on the stove, no heat. And then I added a 1.5 cups of hot water. So I just put that in the microwave and heated it till it was hot because that dissolved the sugar and the cornstarch. And I cooked that until it was getting thicker. Meantime, I was over here and I beat my egg yolks a little bit just to give them a little bit of air. And when my cornstarch and sugar was thickened, I took a few spoonfuls, a little bit at a time, and I put that into the egg yolk, stirring the whole time. And what does that do? What does that do to the egg yolk? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
It tempers the eggs so it doesn't so you don't get scrambled eggs all in your lemon juice.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carol Sue. So it does temper those eggs. You don't want scrambled eggs. So we do that in lots of ways or lots of reasons. And so you're tempering the egg, and then you add the egg back into that sauce, and you mix it all around, and you let it boil for a minute, and then remove the whole thing from heat. And that's when you stir in 3 tablespoons of butter, 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. If you like it a little more tart, you can add a little more lemon juice, and a tablespoon of lemon rind. So I usually just do the rind of 1 lemon and put it in. So whatever you would like, you have some give and take depending upon how much you like lemon. So I am going to now take 4 of these out. I'm getting company today. So relatives are coming. There'll be 4 of us. So this is perfect. I get to make a dessert. And I'm just going to top these with the meringue. And I just want to repeat that what I have here, which degrades a little bit because it's sat here now for a while. Remember, I said the French meringue, not quite as stable, but what I have here is this is 3 egg whites worth. And when you're beating the egg whites, I put this in another bowl so you could see it. But when you're beating it, put it into a big bowl that is going to hold like 8 times the capacity of what you're putting in, because it really beats up a lot. So I'm just going to top these. And feel free to ask questions now or just talk amongst yourselves for a moment, or talk to me just while I'm doing this. I'm going to try to focus. I see that my egg whites are already starting to break down. So this is a real reason why it would be helpful to use that Italian meringue that Loretta uses to top hers. So if we've had problems in the past with our pies weeping and our desserts weeping, some of that's natural. It'll happen with all of the meringues over time, but some of it can be fixed by using a more stable meringue like the Italian. So we're going to need, I think, all of us to give that Italian meringue a try and see what happens.
Deb, do you know the trick about preventing your bowl from sliding all over the counter? You put a damp paper towel underneath the bowl, or a dish towel underneath the bowl.
Oh, great.
And then your bowl doesn't dance across while you're beating.
Oh, cool idea. Yep. Great idea. I like it. I love these tips. Okay, so I'm not like, this isn't giving me the tips that I would like Loretta was talking about. You get to do more with peaks, but I'm still going to try to peak it. And I'm going to do that just by usually what happens with a good meringue is you can lift it up and just put a peak on it. And this isn't peaking because it did start to break down a little bit. But it's still going to be beautiful because it has lots of, it's not smooth on top, and these little tips are going to, they're going to brown a little bit and be pretty. So I'm going to put this in the oven now. Just broil it for a few seconds. And we'll see what happens here to our pie. So
And
again, you can use
what's
the
your oven on?
Yes, my oven is on broil. I just,
Okay, thank you.
I'm just broiling the tips of these right now. So we'll see how that comes out. All right. Let me check my time here. 12:42. Pretty good timing. So what are you thinking so far about what we've talked about? What questions are coming up? What things don't seem clear? What do you think about trying this?
I'm gonna try it when I feel better. It was the cream of tartar. I don't think I was putting enough cream of tartar in there.
Okay.
Coming out right.
Yeah, that's definitely an important piece of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people make lemon meringue pie, you can see where the meringue is coming loose from the sides. What causes that?
Yeah, Cassandra, that's part of that problem with the meringue breaking down. So over time, all meringues are going to break down. And I think Loretta's back. If you want to weigh in on this too, please do. My understanding is that we talked about the meringues from the least stable to the most stable. So the French meringue, which is the one that I've always learned to top my pies with, is the least stable. So I even have a note in my recipe that if I'm making lemon meringue pie for a party or a family gathering, that I'm not going to make that or put the meringue on until the day of the event because it's going to break down. You'll have a little more time with the Italian meringue because the Italian meringue holds up longer, but it's still not going to be something that is stable on a dessert like that as a topping for a long, long time. So it will be typical. Carol Sue, you sent me some information too about watery meringue. What was that?
That is that when it's overdone.
When it's
It's overdone in like in the oven, that's the reason why it separates.
Okay, so if you're baking it too long in the oven. Oh, and speaking of that, oh no, ladies, I got carried away. See, these are the things to not do. But it looks beautiful, and you know what? It's not a terrible thing. Because, those brown sugars are actually kind of nice. So you can imagine what that should look like, a little less toasty, but it's very firm. See how firm it is on the cup? It's not broken down at all. My glasses are not overly hot. Well, that one's hot, but they're not terrible. And so now they're ready to go. I'm just going to let them on the counter and we'll have those for dinner tonight. If I put them in the refrigerator, which is what I'd have to do if I had to go a longer time, then that I think would also bring about that breakdown.
Yeah, okay.
Loretta, would you add anything to the breakdown of the meringue? Any tips or hints that you can recall from those trainings that you had?
No, not really. There's the whole separation of the meringue, like if you're doing a lemon meringue, the meringue from the curd or the lemonness. You were mentioning the Italian meringue is the most stable for that. They kind of where the meringue would adhere to the filling.
Okay. Yeah. So what to refrigerate or not to refrigerate? So now I've made these. What would you say? I was going to leave these out now at room temperature for the day just because I thought that would be okay. Everything's cooked and We're going to be eating them in a few hours. What would you say about keeping them on the counter versus putting them in the refrigerator? Thoughts about that?
I don't know. I think safety wise, it's best to put them in the refrigerator. You
Okay,
know,
especially for leg
if
warmth.
your kitchen gets a little too warm.
Do you think that would hasten the separation or not? Not sure. I'm not sure. So I'm going to experiment with that because I think your thought is a good one. It's eggs. So I'll find room in this very full refrigerator and put them in there. So I'm going to go with the comment there that Loretta made about refrigerating those. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I see some nods, head nodding. Yeah. It's better safe than sorry.
Right.
All right. So here we are. We've done a pretty good overview, I would say, of the how to make a meringue. And I'm going back to my screen sharing here. And when I talk, can you see my slide now?
Yes.
When I talk to you about this, I guess what I'd like to know is what might you, now that you know this, and with what I talked to you about earlier in the session, what would be fun to do as a next step with meringue? Whether it's something that you do on your own or whether it's something we do as a class. Any ideas or suggestions? There's meringue cookies, there's those pavlovas. Would you tend to come back to make a pavlova? Try it? You could say no.
What's a pavlova?
Pardon me? What's a pavlova? Yeah, so it's a dessert that, let me see if I can find the picture of that for you. So just finding out what a pavlova is could be fun. What's really neat about meringue is that for those of us who've only ever used them in pies, there's so many things you can do with them. So let's look up pavlova. I spelled that wrong. So here's some images of pavlovas. Here's a good example. Wouldn't this make a great spring dessert? It's very light. It's this meringue with fruit on top, but you can be so artistic with it. You can layer it, do any number of things with pavlova. So, you know, we could try making pavlovas and show our creations if you found that interesting. So feel free to write to me at that debtheguide@getsetup.io. And if something excites you or you want to try it, I'm happy to entertain that and work on a class for it. Now I
have a question.
You bet. Yes, Juanita. Hi.
Hi. I came in late. Sorry about that.
That's
But you said you put your desserts in the broiler to get them brown. I've never used my broiler. Never.
Never used
So is there another way to get the tops brown?
Well, you could use one of those little torches, kitchen torches.
Kitchen torches?
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to show you one. So they come with a little butane can, and then this is the torch, and you turn it on, you get a flame out of it, and you torch across the top of your dessert, and you brown it. So it's great for creme caramel too.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this afternoon we're having a Mexican fiesta. Happy Cinco de Mayo. It is Happy Cinco de Mayo. So appropriate for a Mexican fiesta. I'm going to do a dessert recipe, so that should be fun. And tomorrow I'm having a session, Let's Talk Cooking, in the afternoon. That's a free form class where we just come together with whatever is on our minds. Like you might have a question or something you want to bounce off the group, or something that you want to talk about for a future class. the sky's the limit. We're very open with that. And I rely on those who attend to bring thoughts, bring questions, and we end up having a great conversation. We can share recipes there. I'd love to see you. I'm doing spotlight series on asparagus and quinoa, different ingredients that we might use in recipes. I know a lot of people are interested in quinoa and what to do with it and how to cook it well. So I'm doing that, but then I'm doing this spotlight on seasonal ingredients. There will be 4 of those coming out in the next few weeks. Spotlight on asparagus, spotlight on spinach, spotlight on peas, and spotlight on strawberries. So would love.
I already signed up for all of them, or I put my notice for all of them.
That is
Yeah, but are you the one, I'm trying to remember that you talked about sugars, how to make delicious desserts,
healthy
desserts.
Healthy desserts. Yes, we look at ways to reduce
Okay.
sugars or replace them. Yes, I do that. Yeah.
Okay, because I've been trying to find the sugars that you mentioned, and I'm having a difficult time.
Are you? So this is one of them. You probably saw that. This is one I really like. It's better than sugar, and it's a combination of erythritol and stevia, the herb stevia. So erythritol is pure alcohol. So if you didn't find it at your grocery store, you might check a health food store. I got mine at the grocery outlet, actually.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sure. So you're going to get class notes from me today, and that they will have all of these recipes. There will be links to information about meringue and videos and things that you can follow up with. And I will also attach a document that will have my lemon meringue dessert on it, which can be either these glasses, or actually it was my lemon meringue pie recipe from my mother-in-law. So just the crust is for this. You'd have to use your own pie crust, but the insides, the filling is for the lemon meringue pie from my mother-in-law. So you will get that, and you will also have an opportunity to click on this button and give me some feedback, which is really important. I look at it all the time. And also to view our schedule and book another class right from here, and invite a friend, or invite a friend if you like this class and you know somebody who is interested in meringue, you can send it along. And when you sign up for a class, you can invite some friends too. I've had that the last couple of days where people who know each other decided to sign up together came, and that's a whole other dimension. It's a lot of fun. So that's it. That's all for today. I'm really glad that you came to this session, and I thank you so much for participating with me and asking questions and going along with my work in the kitchen. Even this, it happens. Take care. See you next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Deb.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Phil. Thank you so much.